Hi, everybody. It is showtime. We are live, and I want to welcome an extraordinary woman, Amanda Betts. Hello.
Thank you. Hi, Bridgette.
Welcome. We are going to be talking about a huge subject that we could actually just talk about for hours. We were just chatting about it now, and actually I went, wait a minute, it's showtime. We've got to get online. Because we're talking
Share
about
that stuff. Share those gems.
Exactly. So let's talk about you first, Amanda. So I have got so many words to describe you. There is a lot, isn't there?
There is.
So you are an ex-model agent and an ex-model. Hey, you're a project creator, a trustee, a facilitator, and you are a teenage whisperer. I've experienced with you working with my children, and you've made a massive difference in that regard. You do a lot of coaching and mentoring, workshops, health and well-being. You're very versatile. Tell us more about yourself.
I think you pretty much covered a lot of stuff there. So basically, I do all of those things, and I'm an inspirational speaker. I'm actually in the midst of writing a book. But the biggest thing that I really do, I'm also the founder of Heartspeak Worldwide. And what we do is we help people, charities and projects, gain visibility and funds and awareness. And we do that through upcycling and recycling clothes. And a large part of my work is mentoring and coaching. So I work with both ex-incarcerated young people, women on probation, men. Pretty soon I've worked with some young people, young boys as well, on probation who are in the youth justice system and the care and protection system. And I'm also coaching women around the world, both with their brand and visibility, like which I do with Leanne Costi of Better Your Biz, and also helping both parents have better relationships with their young people, their teenagers, and vice versa, and helping teenagers cope with the craziness and the realities, the stark, polarizing realities of coping in this world, especially at this particular time.
Exactly. And it's just getting harder and harder. So co-parenting, it's a huge subject, as I've mentioned before.
It's a massive topic, and one we both have, personal experience with, which is why, we thought that we'd do this particular topic, because it is so difficult when you're parenting, co-parenting with a tricky ex. I call them tricky. You can fill in the blanks, whatever you want to call your ex, but I say tricky, because when something's tricky, it has got the possibility of movement. Right? You don't have to be stuck. Like if you say a shitty ex, for example, or a difficult ex, even though they might be both of those things, when you say tricky, at least we've got some sort of movement, to help them navigate their way through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest issue with co-parenting is communication.
Yeah,
isn't it?
It sure is. I mean, it's the big C word.
Yeah.
It is the big C word, communication. But also behind communication is another of what I think is one of the most powerful words in the world. And it's bigger than love, this particular C word. Do you know what it is? It's connection.
Connection.
Right? Because you can't have love without it. You can't have communication without it. You can't have a positive relationship without it. You can't even start a car without it, right? You can have the most powerful Maserati in the world, right? But if you don't put the key into the ignition and connect, that car is powerless, right? It's worth nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the couples that we're talking about obviously have had a connection, a really deep connection, because they've got children together. And really that connection has changed. I mean, if you've got children, as I say to clients, if you've got children together, you've got to realize that you're going to be in each other's lives for a lot of years. There's weddings, grandchildren, and school interviews, and everything that you need to be a part of moving forward. So you really have to make
and you can either have a good time doing it, or you can have a crappy time doing it. Another C word, right? It can be crap for you, or it can be great for you.
Exactly. And and also the thing is that people have got to have no regrets in terms of how they act. No regrets. acting in their best selves and acting in the best interests of the children moving forward. And sometimes, that is difficult when you have problems managing your emotions. It really does.
Well, it is. It's a really difficult thing. If you were to say to me, what are one of the biggest challenges that faces the world today? I wouldn't say it's the other C word with COVID. Yeah. I would say it's emotional regulation. That's the biggest challenge that we have. And so that's what makes exes tricky as well, because someone, maybe, it's a lack of emotional regulation, right? We just have no idea. We're responding. We're going into survival thinking instead of critical or strategic thinking, right? Because we're either attacking or defending ourselves, which makes the exes become more tricky, more difficult, more challenging, because they're like, there you go, doing that same thing that you've always done. And that's why I can't do this with you. And that's why I got out. And that's why I left you. And that's why I don't want to talk to you. And it's like, but we need to learn how to communicate with each other, right? Because there's no getting around it. I always sort of said, to Craig is my ex-husband, and he's the father of my child. And then I had a wife for 16 years. So tried both sides of the fence, which was awesome. But I only really, it's like, great. We're here to have experiences. But when I left Craig, we had a lot of challenges, and we were both really angry. We were really angry at each other. Of course, you break up for a good reason. There were lots of reasons, which were totally between myself and Craig. And Craig would be vile to me, because he would be just so angry. And I totally understand, because I was doing therapy, so I was learning new tools about communication and what was okay and not okay and how to deal with things and all that kind of stuff. And he wasn't jumping onto that bandwagon, which put our wedge even further, right? Because one of us was willing to learn and grow, and the other one was trapped in their bitterness, anger, hatred, fill in the blanks, right?
And that comes out in being passive or aggressive. Whereas people try and focus on being assertive. That is the approach that you need to focus on. But when you're lost in this chaos of terrible communication, it's very
and attack or defense, right? Like quite often, as I said, we're too much on the AD. It's either we're going to attack or we're going to defend. And one day, Craig would attack, and I'd have to defend. Because and I worked really hard to make sure that I didn't attack back. And then one day I actually said to him, you know what? I've got an analogy, right? So I always use sports analogies with Craig and food analogies and car analogies, right? Because he identifies with those particular things. And I said, look, mate, I'm the mechanic, okay? I take care of the internal work. I take care of the emotional work, and I take care of the mental work and the psychological work. You cannot see the work that I'm doing, but I'm helping this engine grow. Now, there's no point having this car that hasn't got a shell around it, like a vehicle, right? There's no point having an engine, right, taking care of all the internal mechanisms of the car if you're not being the great panel beater that you are. You're not a very good mechanic, but you're a great panel beater. You're great at taking care of the outside of Isaac. You'd get him skiing, take him to rugby practice. You're really engaged and involved. That's awesome. Be a great panel beater. I won't disturb the panel beater in your work. Don't disturb the mechanic in my work, because we've got 16 years of influence, and this car has got to be roadworthy. We're going to lose our influence by 16 years if we're lucky. Every time you disturb me and you attack the mechanic can't get on with the work, right? The mechanic's not putting love into the car, because she's defending herself against the panel beater who doesn't think that her work is worthy, right? You're not going to know. I'm the mechanic. Let me be the mechanic. You're the panel beater. I'll let you be the panel beater, and let's get this car roadworthy, because after we've finished being the mechanics and the panel beaters, it's out of our hands.
Yeah. You want
to spend all your time attacking me, right? And I have to spend all my time defending against you. We're not going to get anywhere, and we're going to be in real trouble when this kid becomes a teenager. So it's actually up to you. And as soon as I said that, it changed everything. So if I've got a tip, and it leads back to what you were saying before, which was a really good one, we've got to learn to accept the role that each parent plays and the things that they bring to the table, the good things that they bring.
So you've got to, people have expectations, obviously, of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that those expectations obviously have to be the same for their co-parent. But, that doesn't happen.
No, and it's not a reality. If we're setting these unrealistic high expectations for our exes on how we want them to be and how we want them to play, we're going to be sorely disappointed. And then, of course, behind this, once we're not going to show our disappointment and say, hey, I'm really disappointed in you. We're going to go, I'm really angry at you. You never do this and you always do that. Right. And if I've got a tip right now that I just want to tell you while I'm on that one, if I've got a really top tip, start taking out never when you communicate with your ex and always, because nothing is never and nothing is always. Right. Other than the sun shines every day, always. We can't always see it, but it does shine all the time. But when it comes to human, us as far as communication, etc., right? Nothing is never, never, and nothing is always, always.
And that comes back to neutral statements. It's never I did this and you did that. It's always talking in the we. Talking in the we. We need to be aligned in relation to this issue with our child because X, Y, Z. That's really important. As you say, it's just the blame game otherwise. So I've got a scenario, Amanda, that I really want to talk about now. So I've got a client who is a male. His ex-wife is very toxic. She disappeared and she left him with his 3 kids. And it's been really impossible for him. Yeah, it's been really impossible for him to communicate with her. It was a terrible scenario that he's going through. Can they co-parent? Was that more of a parallel parenting scenario? And how can he make things different in that regard?
Yeah, it's always really, really hard when one parent is left holding the baby, so to speak, right? When they are doing the lion's share of the work, it's going to cause a lot of behavioral issues for the kids because the parent is constantly in survival mode, right? They're just trying to survive. They're just trying to stay alive. They're just trying to get food on the table. And, it amazes me that parents, no matter whether you're, men or women, husbands or wives, whatever, can get up and walk away and just leave, the other parent basically taking care of the children. And 3 children's a lot to take care of. That's a lot of management, that's required, and all of a sudden a really massive full-time job that they've been lumped with.
And I can relate.
On top of trying to survive.
Yeah, I can relate. I have 4 children on my own. Pretty much,
you do.
100%. And at times, that can get really frustrating. And you need to learn some techniques and tools and strategies in terms of how you can actually do that positively for your sake, and the children's. It's really important.
And what I would say to that too, because it's like I totally relate. I know I've taken care, of one of your children. I've actually really been there as a mentor, for them while they are going through the stuff that they are, and the huge impact that it has on kids, that they will spend the rest of their lifetime trying to recover and heal from is phenomenal. It's really, really phenomenal. So what do you do in a situation like that when you can't communicate with them? The best thing that you can actually do is really communicate articulately and clearly and succinctly via email. It's the best thing that you can do, because quite often we get mixed up with our words. What emails do, not text messages, but emails. Right?
And not on the phone.
First of all, exactly. And then the best thing is you've got a paper trail, right? And I've got a top tip for you for this one. This is a massive tip. And I actually learned this from a really grumpy old employer of mine who was a top PR guy at the time. And I absolutely adored him. His name was Ron Clark, and he was so straight up and so blunt. And he taught me this, and it has stayed with me, for over 30 years of my life, and I still use it. When it comes to your lips and your fingertips, never let anything leave, and I do say never, as much as you can, because you can control this, right? Never let anything leave your lips or your fingertips that you do not want for social media to find out about, and that you wouldn't like read on the TV1 news. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so the lips and the fingertips, that is a really good tip.
That can end up in court. All of that evidence.
Absolutely. Not only could it end up in court, but socially. Okay, socially, you want to, because then you're sticking to your values. Okay,
don't bag them on social media. That is a do not do.
You don't bag them full stop. You don't bag them on social media. You don't bag them in front of the kids. But just to go back to this one first, right, is before it leaves your lips or your fingertips, do you want that to be read out in television, the local news, or on social media, so that people can see who you are? So that way, what you're doing is you're slowing down the thinking, because that is a really big challenge, is we need to slow down the thinking, because again, people are often in defense or attack, right? If you send a ball over to your ex's field, they might see that as an attack, even though you've not meant it to be an attack. Because what I wanted for today was how to do it on your own, right? When your ex will not get involved with you, because that is a really big challenge where people have their exes and their exes are out for whatever reason. They're clocked out. They've had enough. They're not going to talk to you, and you can't get anything achieved. And yet you've still got stuff that needs to be achieved with the children. Right? Like in your case, you had Millie in the hospital, when your children in hospital with serious heart issues. I mean, that should be the first case where the ex should be straight on the phone to you, going, hey, what's happening with our child? Can you fill me in? What does it mean? What does she need to do? What do I need to do? What can I do? Right? And you didn't get that. I'm sorry, but you didn't. You didn't get that. So when that happens to people, to us, and to your client as well, I mean, poor guy trying to raise 3 kids on his own, as well as, provide food on the table and everything else that they're doing. The best that you can do is you can email them and you give them the information that they need to hear, right? And you do it always kindly. One of the big mistakes that people make, and this is one I've called you out on as well, is don't be too sharp and short. Don't be too sharp and short. Never lose who you are as a person, and so this is a really top tip again. Always be kind. Think about KLT. Right? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it true? KLT.
Absolutely. And I've got something to add to that. A tip that I use it a lot with my clients is BIF. So keeping the email brief, informative, firm, and friendly. I tell clients to write down 5 things about your ex that are positive things, and start your emails with one of those. And that works. I do a lot of amending clients' emails to their ex-spouses. Yes, I mean, as Amanda talked about, I've made mistakes in the past. This is why this
we all have, honey.
I've been disparaging. I'm guilty of that in the past, of disparaging my ex, because
good on you for owning that.
I own it. I was so frustrated because I want the children to achieve, and it can be very, very difficult. We're only human. We all make mistakes, as you've said, and it's learning from those mistakes and being able to make positive changes to move forward. You always got to be thinking of the children in this, because as you said, Amanda, children can be affected long-term from high conflict divorces,
and well, they do. And you know what happens? In my work, I work with extreme trauma, right? Extremely traumatized young people. And a lot of that trauma is not necessarily like, yes, my South Auckland, West Auckland kids, man, have they got some trauma. But you know what the hardest trauma to deal with is actually, Bridgette? It's the trauma that parents from, normal environments, in inverted commas, where both the parents are at work, and there might be some affluence involved, some wealth, some influence, some or just average people going about their lives, right? They're the ones that actually do more damage on the children because they are not putting in the time, the effort, and the energy. You know, like I always sort of say, there's these 4 pillars, right? We want things cheaply, right? We're always thinking about our bottom line, our dollar, right? So we want things cheaply. That's the first thing, right? We want to save $1 wherever we can. The second thing is we want things quickly. We want a quick fix, right? It's like, how do I fix this? Just make it quick. The third thing that we're quite often doing is we want it as painlessly with as less effort as possible. Okay, I don't have enough time or energy for this, right? So what can I do, right? And then the last part is that we're not prepared to make the sacrifices, right? So when it comes to, I think, communication and co-parenting these, children, and children turn into teenagers, right? And if you don't do it when they're children, you are going to be faced with it when they become teenagers.
Yeah,
it's going to be a hell of a lot worse. And so when you're communicating, right, everyone needs to know about, okay, let's not try and get through this cheaply and necessarily, right, or as quickly as we can. And as with this, it's going to take time, energy, money, and effort, right, to become better at co-parenting and to become better at communicating. So if you're not a good communicator, you go to someone and get an expert and learn how to communicate better, right? Which is why, I so support and endorse your work, and which is why I want to work with you, because that's what you're starting to doing. Like, as you said, amending the communication. So really, it's a really quick tip for you, for anyone, is what I mean, is like, if it leaves, before it leaves your lips and fingertips, think about what it's going to do. Think about those 4 things. Am I trying to get through this too cheaply, quickly, because you're time poor, without putting too much energy into it and without making sacrifices? Right. So it's like, that's what we're going to have to do. And the other one that I really wanted to talk about too, is pain is temporary, regret is forever. Right. So it might be painful right now to be communicating with your ex, but the regret, because because you guys aren't doing the job properly, it's going to come out in the children. We're
not divorcing your children. You're not divorcing your children. But
no, and you can't divorce your children. You can't just walk away from them.
No.
Well, somebody's got to be there. I mean, a lot of people do walk away from their children. And when they do, that they're going to behave and start acting out, when they're teenagers, and they're going to cause you a lot more pain. So that's another top tip. Pain is temporary, regret is forever. So go through the pain right now, learn how to do it right now, and save yourself a truck ton of pain in behaviors with your children later.
I've got another, letting go of the past. Okay. That was an issue that I had, was letting go of the past. I put up my hand for that with my frustration in terms of the parenting.
I love ownership, Bridgette. That is, it's so important that people take ownership. So I just want to acknowledge you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I really, it makes a huge difference.
I mean, you and I, we've learned from our mistakes, and we can help people positively ensure that they don't, fall into the pitfalls that we have made in the past. So in terms of that, you shouldn't be holding grudges, continue to hold in grudges, resentment or anger towards them. You need to let go of the past, however difficult that is. Get some therapy, to let that go, talk about it for hours and let it go. Write your story and then rip it up. Create a new story for yourself. Positive story for yourself.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me too. You've just brought up something really important there. I've in a lot of my work that I do, because people think that it's the ex, right? That if they went away, if they got killed by a truck, that would be fantastic, because then all your problems would be over, right? And I don't know about you, but I've certainly been guilty. In the earlier stages, I have a very positive relationship with my ex-husband and his partner. Which is great. There's a lot of acceptance, a lot of radical acceptance that needed to happen for things to shift within our relationship.
You've read that book, have you? Radical Acceptance. Have you read that book?
What's that?
Have you read that book, Radical Acceptance? I'll have to give
No,
it to you.
but it's actually radical acceptance. I think is just such an important tool, to actually radically accept people for where they are. As I said, Craig's an amazing panel beater, and I've just got to radically accept that. And actually, I helped Isaac, my son, with accepting his dad for who he is, and taking all the great that his dad is, knowing, the not so great that his dad is, and no doubt the same for me, but just like really just accepting him for where he's at, within his own specific journey. It's such an important
respect, isn't it? Having respect for each other is hugely important. It really is.
Yeah, it is.
You can't give that enough.
With regards to letting go of grudges too, it's my therapist, I did 6 years of psychotherapy, and it was $40,000. It was every single week, unless she was away or I was away. And she used to say to me, another top tip is, if the more you can feel it and the quicker it slices through you, the older it is and the more it belongs to you. So one of the big things that happens is quite often we think it's the other person that's causing us to feel like that, or like a certain kind of way. But in actual fact, if we can feel it, it means that we've got work to do around it, right? So one of the most important things is, where do you get stuck with your story, believing that it's all about your ex and what they've done? You get stuck in the story. So it's the same story. It's just different characters, different scripts, different locations.
It's two parties in that story, isn't it? There's two parties. It's not just one person's fault. You end up separating because there's faults on both sides. That's just the reality of it. And I say to my clients, move from being stuck in your story to the business of divorce. And that includes being the best parent that you can totally be.
Yeah,
and you
while taking care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got a narrative that you keep repeating, if you do not deal with it within your relationship with your ex and as a co-parent, then you will be forced, right? Learn by choice or be taught by force, because that is a universal law. Right. And so many people, like what you just said before, and you alluded to it before, they do not seek the expert help that they need. And the strongest thing that I could ever recommend, right, is that if the other parent, and quite often it happens, I chose therapy and my ex-husband was like, no, man, nothing wrong with me. I don't need to go to therapy. And I thought, okay, right, well, I'm going to go to therapy. And so I went to therapy, and guess what? I learned a whole bunch of communication skills. I learned a whole bunch of tools, because I basically went to the University of Therapy, right? So I was able to then apply those skills, not just in my relationship with my ex-husband, but in every interaction and interpersonal relationship that I have. And as a result, I came out the biggest winner, which then again leads me to another tip. I never lose. I either win or learn, right? We've got to stop looking at this as a game of revenge that we need to seek on our ex, right?
Yeah, and this comes back to, doesn't it, looking at your own behaviors that might be impacting the situation. And that's what you need to do, is you need to do some self-reflection, get some therapy, work with you, work with me. And go, okay.
Look at what you're flushing down the toilet each day, because that's yours and it belongs to you and it came out of you, right? So keep looking at what's coming out of you, if you like. And then because you can't change the other person, but you can change yourself.
That's right. You can only control you. You can't control your ex's behaviours, his actions, or her actions.
No.
It's I remember my parents saying to me, think before you speak, and that is relevant here. Isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is. It is think before you speak. It really is think before you speak. And just a couple of quickies that I think is really important. I listened to this amazing podcast the other day. Amazing podcast. It's called the Skillful Podcast. Okay. And it had the 10 communication myths on it, right? Which was really, really interesting, because when again, you can't teach your ex how to communicate, but you can learn how to communicate better, right? So, and that's all you can do when you're co-parenting, right? Especially when you're co-parenting, right? Is you improve you. You do you, boo, right? And on it they had, there's a couple of things. It's called the Skillful Podcast. So I'd really strongly recommend that people look it up because, man, not only the more that you learn, not only about yourself, but how people psychologically think, why they do what they do, which is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or RO, CBT, which is radically open dialectical behavioral therapy. So one is about if you are under controlled, right? So when you fly off the handle, right? So for example, if you've got an under controlled ex where you say something and then they fly off the handle, they go nuts, and you're like, whoa, 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 right? That's called under control. Okay, that means that they don't have enough control of their emotions. They don't know how to emotionally regulate. On the opposite side is the over control. So under control is usually binge eaters, borderline personality disorders. There's a lot more people with borderline personality disorder than what we actually are aware of, right?
Oh, yeah.
Then under control is over control, which is more my type of tendency. So my ex-husband was an under control. He just let loose, and all of a sudden it would just be like volcano explosions everywhere, right? And shit was everywhere, and I had to wear it. I, on the other hand, was over-controlled, and that's usually associated with self-harmers, suicidal ideation, and also anorexics, eating disorders, people with eating disorders, for example, where they have no control in their life. So they take too much control where they can, which is usually over themselves, because they can stop themselves from eating, right? So, for example, I'm an over controller. My ex-husband was an under controller. So therefore, we were never the twain shall meet communication-wise, because he blasts off and I shut down, right? So that's what I learned in this podcast about RODBT and DBT, and the importance of each. And that is about seeking expert help and advice. The last thing that I really want to also suggest to people is that we need to read the 4 Agreements, right? An amazing, amazing book by Don Louise Miguel. Incredible, simple, easy book. And it's called the 4 Agreements.
We'll put these in this so people can, the Skilled Podcast,
the Skillful Podcast, and the 4 Agreements.
The 4 Agreements,
and the 4 Agreements basically, in short, is this, because I know we're limited time. The first agreement is always be impeccable with your word. Okay, so again, it goes back to that lips and fingertips. Be impeccable with your word. Try not to swear. Try not to use foul language. Try not to never, and should and always. Never, should, always. Those are, they're just nasty. The NAS of nasty. I'll have to think of it something to do the TY, right? Never, always, should. Our 2, there we go. The T could be for 2, and Y is the U. Oh my gosh, I've just made it up right then. 2, yep, never. I have to write that down because it'll go. Oh my gosh, so good. Okay, so the 4 Agreements. So always be impeccable, be impeccable with your word, because then you can stand next to your word, right? The second thing is never take it personally. Very, very seldomly is it actually about you. It's about stuff that's being reflected for them, that's being brought up for them. Their mother didn't do this, or their father never did that, or they were missing and absent. And so therefore, it's very rarely actually about you. Yeah, sure, we can all be a-holes and they can be a-holes, but it's not actually about them being an a-hole. It's actually, if you look beyond that, look beyond the behavior, it's usually because they were disappointed, they're not worthy, they feel neglected, they feel isolated. There's always feelings behind the behavior. We do not spend enough time looking beyond the behavior and at the actual feelings of the person. Then we understand better. It's like, oh, okay. It's a little bit like Mad Uncle Mike in the corner doing crazy things, right? You go, that's Mad Uncle Mike. That's okay. It's Mad Uncle Mike. That's what our exes are like. They're the mad Uncle Mikes doing crazy things, saying crazy things, because they're not actually dealing with their stuff, okay, when you've got a tricky ex. So don't always take things so personally. The third thing is stop making assumptions. We all know this. It's the lettuce leaf syndrome. You know, if you eat lettuce, it's going to be better for you than eating chips. So why don't you do it? Stop assuming. As soon as you start predicting the future, or even if they've behaved like an a-hole all the time, right? Today might be the day where something changed for them. And it also might not be, okay?
Yeah.
However, stop assuming, right? Yeah. So don't assume. And the fourth one is always do your best. If you always do your best, then you can sleep at night. You know that you did your best. You weren't sitting there putting all of your focus into winning the game against them, with attacking them or defending yourself against them. So it's like if you apply all of the tips that we've actually power punched into, under 35 minutes so far, there are tips in there that will help you better co-parent with your tricky ex if you so choose. And guess what? You'll learn amazing communication skills along the way.
And your life will be a lot happier, a lot less stressful.
Yeah. And then anxiety. Guess what? It's better, isn't it better to grow a healthy adult than it is to fix a broken child? To grow a healthy child than to fix a broken adult.
Yeah, right? It's more difficult as they get older. It's more difficult as they get older.
And then you lose control and influence. And then you have to start seeing people like me to help you just to get to zero, let alone thriving.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I appreciate all of the help that you've given my family with parenting. Parenting is not easy. Relationships become harder.
It's hard work.
People have children. It's certainly not what we all thought it was going to be. None of us got our parenting manual, did we, in the post?
No.
Right? But Amanda, that's fantastic. This has been really useful for a lot of people. I will put down those couple of resources there, and I'd really like you to join me again next week in another podcast.
Sounds fabulous.
Podcast today. We're doing Facebook Live. It would be really fantastic. If you've got any questions, please reach out to Amanda or me. We're here to help. We've been in the trenches. We've been at the coalface, varying degrees.
We really have.
So we know what we're talking about, having been there and then seeing it in our practices every day. And things, if you're going through a difficult time at the moment in terms of lockdown, in terms of your relationship, dealing with children, realize things do get better. And it's all about modifying your behavior and realizing that you can't do that with your ex. You can't
stay in your own lane.
That's exactly it. Exactly.
Yeah,
Stay in the lane.
Said,
you say, you do you, boo. Is that what you said? Yes, it is.
Yeah, exactly. Just look at what you put in the toilet, okay? That's yours. It belongs to you. So just keep focusing on you, you and what you're putting into your body and your mind and your heart. I mean, I always say what you fill your mind with is what you will be full of, right? So if you keep filling yourself, with toxicity about another person, whoever it is, whether it's your ex or your boss or your colleagues or your children or whatever, your parents, whatever, fill in the blank, you will be full of it, right? Yeah. And this is like my last parting words. This one is a really good one that really helped me. Revenge is like holding onto a hot rock with the intention of throwing it at someone else. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's a good one. If you hold on to a hot rock, right, revenge is like holding on to a hot rock. It's only going to affect you. And even if you throw it at someone else, it hits them and bounces off them, right?
Yeah. Might come back.
Stop holding on to the hot rock. Where do you need to catch yourself? Stop holding on to the hot rock.
Yeah. So I hope you've heard that, people. And have a wonderful rest of the day. And we will be back next week. So we will advertise that shortly, what we're going to be talking about. If anyone's got any comments to make or any topics that they really want to talk about, then we would be happy to oblige. So
you would love that.
We had a lot of people.
I love to get into it. I love to get into gritty topics, Bridgette.
Yeah, so send us any of your gritty topics that you want discussing. Of course, it's all private. Privacy. We won't mention who you are, that you've brought up a topic that you want to discuss.
We won't out you.
No, we
won't leave our lips or fingertips, honey.
No, that's right. we've had a lot of people interested in what we've been saying today, Amanda, which is fantastic.
Oh, good.
So,
I can't see a damn thing. So
yeah, that's right. Love to you all, and we will be back next week.
And I'll talk to you shortly, Bridgette.
Yes.
Ka kite
Bye.
anō. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.